So I started to explore this kind of emerging trend, which now is called Jamstack. It's also called static sites. And I was like, wow, that's amazing, because those sites are like what I dreamed that WordPress was. They're fast, they're scalable. You never have these issues with them suddenly slowing down because of traffic or crashing. They are secure. There's nothing really to hack there when it's just a collection of static files. So I was like, that's amazing. I want to test that out for our customers. And I started to look into it, and I realized that it's very complicated. It's complicated to build those sites, which means it would be much more expensive. You have to take a lot of different tools and like kind of glue them together in a way that works for you and for your customer. In general, the types of sites that work well as static are your traditional content types of sites. That could be a business site, and it could be a blog actually also. Those are the best. The hardest ones to make static are e-commerce sites, for example, like WooCommerce, because that's very heavily dependent on the dynamic functionality of the database for the shopping cart, for example. Even though there are headless alternatives, tons of websites are running on WooCommerce, and converting them to something else is challenging. So WooCommerce, even though it desperately needs a boost in speed in general, it's hard. Yeah, it's really, it's hard to make it static. And another type of site that's also challenging are like membership types of sites, or sites with gated content where the user logs in, and often using the WordPress login functionality to gain access to content. And once the site's static, that no longer exists. So, but there's different ways that an agency can build a WordPress website and then deliver it to the customer where they can benefit from the WordPress side of it and the static. There's more complicated ways, which is building the WordPress site as a headless site. So you use the back end and has nothing to do with the front end, but then you lose the benefits of WordPress, like Gutenberg or the page builders, because they're not connected between the back end and the front end, and a lot of plugins. So there's that, and it's more complicated. It's more complicated to maintain. But if someone goes that route, they could theoretically use the WordPress backend with the REST API, and then let's say Gatsby to deliver the front end. And then there's a number of static services. So there's like a static plugin, WP to static, where you can run your site on your own server space, and it generates a static version of the site. That's pretty good and pretty cheap, because you can just, there's like almost no cost involved, but it won't capture dynamic functionality or a lot of different functionality that's very common in WordPress. So even things like 301 redirects or an XML sitemap, and it won't always catch all of the content. And also that process of generating the static site is very resource intensive. Yeah. And if you're on any kind of shared hosting that's not powerful enough, your site could actually get shut down by the hosting company. So there's that approach. And then there's Strattic, which of course I'm most familiar with. And the goal of Strattic is to make static very accessible to everyone, because what we do is we let you use WordPress as you're used to, and all you have to do is click a button. And when you click that button to generate the static version of the site, we do a lot of things behind the scenes. So we capture 301 redirects, and we capture the XML sitemaps and robots.txt, and we can support a lot of different things like infinite load, like page, load, and we replace the search automatically with Algolia search. So and forms. We support Gravity Forms out of the box, and Contact Form 7. So our users don't have to deal with forms and things like that. They just click the button and the static site works. Sometimes some things need to be tweaked, and we work with the customer to tweak those things or like recommend replacements. That's why we created a static tools directory on our site. So someone can be like, I need to use X functionality. They go in, they look in our directory, and they can find solutions that work perfectly on Strattic and static. So with agencies, it's a matter of education and understanding what a static output means, what traditionally it doesn't support, and then thinking about the different services that exist and what works best for them in terms of cost and simplicity.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you broke down even 3 approaches on making websites static. And WP to static, I think it's by Leon Stafford, if I remember the name correctly. I use one of his other plugins. I think it's called Static HTML Output. That is what I use to build the landing page. And you are absolutely right that it works well, but it's also kind of difficult to use because you have to, or when I built the opt-in form with Elementor, I then had to custom code a JavaScript function that goes back to an AJAX call on the WordPress website that then handles the integration with ActiveCampaign, because obviously I cannot include the ActiveCampaign API key in a JavaScript file on the static website. So that are some of the hoops that you have to jump through when you're building static websites. But I think it's a good approach to get started and to just play around with this technology to use some of these plugins. And then as you're getting ready to sell static websites to your customers, you might want to look into more solid and more sophisticated solutions.
And I imagine that that's the case with a lot of agencies. If they say to their customers, this is the hosting that in our expert opinion, right, because they're the experts in that scenario, in our expert opinion is the best for you. It will keep your site secure, fast, scalable. It also helps us do our work better, and could even reduce maintenance costs, because one of the other advantages of running a WordPress site in this manner is that you have less reactionary time. You don't have to deal with white screen of death or downtime, because if, let's say, the WordPress site has downtime, let's say not downtime not because of us, but let's say you install a plugin and everything just borks, which can happen. You have PHP errors now on all the pages. Doesn't matter, because the static site is completely disconnected. That keeps running fine. It's like, well, I don't care what's going on with the WordPress site. So then you can fix the WordPress site without panicking, without everyone going, oh my gosh, downtime, help, get it back up. You do it, you fix it, you make sure everything works, and you're fine. So that can save costs on the agency side, and potentially even those costs could carry over to the customers, or not. It's up to the agency. But those types of maintenance issues are just less common. So you save a lot of time. You can actually do the work you got into this to do, which is building websites rather than trying to always like fix them and keep them alive.
Interesting. So it's I always thought about the difference between WordPress-based website and static website more of a technology question, but it's really more an example of how to convey the benefits of what you're doing to your customer rather than how you're doing it.
Exactly. So when we're talking, until now, most of the people who have been interested in Strattic are developer-oriented types of people, because they are the ones who are first to look for this type of solution. They're sick of working with WordPress. WordPress isn't cool, it's legacy, it has all these headaches and issues. They are tired of it and they don't want it anymore. So they'll look for static and headless solutions to WordPress and come across Strattic. And it's really easy to explain to them why Strattic is beneficial. And to them, all we say is static architecture, Jamstack, and that's the benefit, right? The platform itself, the architecture is the benefit. But when you're talking to people who aren't technically oriented, which is maybe a lot of like even agency site builders, the people who are implementing sites and also their customers, if you say to them at this point in time, it's Jamstack and it's static, they're going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just want my site to work, right? Yeah. So if you communicate the benefits, that helps. I do project that eventually everyone will catch up to this trend, not just the like early adopter tech people, and everyone will start to look for these types of solutions, because that term will start to mean to everyone security, resilience, stability, and all that.